Hey guys, Ben Bolton again with CG Tuts Plus, and we have crossed the hump. We are now into the second half of this four-part knife creation tutorial. In this part 3, we are going to be UV mapping the low poly knife and then baking the normal map and occlusion map from the high poly to the low poly. So let's just get started here on the UV map. So we're going to start with the blade. We don't have to attach anything yet. We're going to work with everything separated as it is. And before we do anything, we're just going to reset X-forms. And we're going to do this with every object. Even if we think we already have, we're just going to do it once more, make sure, because if we don't do it, then we'll get lots of nasty scaling problems on the UV, and things will generally be suboptimal. So now that that's all set, we're going to add our modifier, unwrap UV, and we are going to mirror the sides of the knife to save on UV space, because they're the same thing on both sides, so we don't really lose anything by it. So we're just going to turn off ignore backfacing, jump into the side view for a second here, and just select everything on the side. Jump into perspective, make sure we didn't get the top where we didn't want it. We didn't. Alright, now we're going to turn off normalize map. That'll ensure that the proportions remain the same when we do our projection. Then we're going to do our quick planar map. Oops, something has gone wrong. We're going to make sure we have this plane set up right on the x-axis, then do our quick planar map. And here we go. We've got our blade. Now try to relax this. I'm not sure if it's going to work. If it doesn't, it's no big deal. Alright, clearly it didn't work. We shouldn't need to relax this too much, of course, because it's a pretty flat object already, so we will be relaxing things later on, so I'll show you guys that then. For now, we just have to select everything that is on a different smoothing group, and make sure that everything that has a smoothing group of its own is on its own UV island. What that means is the bottom part of this blade here is on smoothing group 3, I believe, whereas the side of this is 5 and the top here is 1. So since the smoothing groups are different, this selected part has to be its own UV island. So we're just going to detach that and move it down ever so slightly. Then we're going to do the same for the top, because that also has its own smoothing group. There we go. And finally, we're just going to select one entire side as best we can. Just want to make sure we didn't get anything we didn't mean to here. Alright, and then we're going to detach that as well. And that's just to make sure that we don't have these top pieces connecting or these bottom pieces connecting, because if you remember from tutorial 2, we did split the smoothing groups there as well. So everything's broken up fine now, and that should do it. I'm just going to manually relax this a bit. But otherwise, this is pretty good. So now we're just going to do the faces that we still have to map. Going to turn average normals back on. Quick planar map. This we will relax. Face angles in 2000 iterations. 2000 is a little overkill for this, but it's just what I default to. It's just kind of my mental preset at this point from doing it so often. It helps a lot when you have more complex shapes that are just mapped terribly by default, and that you have to relax quite a bit. So 2000, it might be overkill for some things, but you know, I'd rather have too much and waste a little time than have too little. Alright, so there's the blade. we'll just file that away. Now, yeah, we're going to hide the things that we've already mapped, just to get them out of the way. And now this grip. This grip, if you'll remember correctly from the first tutorial, has different details on each side, which means that whereas otherwise we would just mirror this as we just did with the blade, we're not going to be able to. So we're going to do each side individually. First, we'll reset our X forms, make sure we don't get any funky distortion going on. We'll throw on our UV modifier, faces, and although we're not going to lay them on top of each other, we are going to do each side. We're going to map each side at the same time. So view left. We are going to select everything. My viewports are getting messed up. And then we're going to deselect everything that's not the edges. And fail at doing so. Let's try that again. Alright, there we go. It's being oddly touchy here. Alright, I think that did it. Yep, we've got both sides now. We need to set that to X. If we go to average normal, since of course they're facing two opposite directions, we'll just get a horrible map there, so we're going to need to go to X there. Quick planar map it. Oops, actually, need to turn off normalize map, then quick planar map it. And here we go. Now, of course, we're not going to be mirroring these, so what we need to do is just select one side and move that off, and then figure out if it's backwards or correct. Alright, that one's correct, which means we're going to need to flip this one. Yep, alright, these are both correct now. So now all that's left is to do this large strip all around it. And in order to do that, we are just going to start with this right here. And we're going to need to average normals. There we go. And just keep doing this. Actually, alternately. We'll do a bunch of them at once. Relax them. Always set this as default. The face angles in 2000, so you don't have to do it every time you relax something. And we'll just do this for a while. Basically, we just keep repeating this select, map, relax process until we've got the entire thing done. And in fact, to do this a bit quicker, we'll turn on ignore back facing and see if we can't. There we go. Now we're cooking with fire. Alright. Yeah, here we go. Okay. And I'm just going to finish doing this along the rest of this strip, and we'll pick up once I've done that. Okay, we've got all our segments done. Now all we have to do is connect them. So we're just going to start here. I'm going to figure out which edge. Now the viewer, since this is a first-person weapon, will be holding it something like this because the blade comes out up here. So if we have a seam, we want it to be out of view. And I figure this is a pretty good spot. Actually, back here would probably be better because you're even less likely to see that, but this probably won't be seen either, so this will be fine. So this is where we want our seam to be, which means we're going to connect or sew all of these seams here, 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 until we get one big UV island that goes all the way around this model. And we might break that up during UVing later, but for now we're just going to get it all on one big island for convenience. So we've got our edges selected, stitch, 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 and stitch. Then, just for kicks, which I'm big into, we'll relax everything. And there we go. Good to go. That's a really long chain, so we probably will break that up later on, but for now we'll just leave it like I said. And I believe we moved the knife here over there, so we'll just move this over so it doesn't conflict with the knife when we add them together later. Okay, that's all set. Hide. Now we'll do these first because they look pretty simple. These are the grips, the wood grips. We'll reset the X-forms, which I'm like 90% sure we already did, but better to be safe than have to go and clean it up later. Go to unwrap. Gonna do this now so I don't forget. Normalize map off. Ignore back facing, we don't want, because we're going to mirror these because they're literally the exact same thing on each side. So we select everything there, X, open our edit window, and there we go. Now, I'm not sure if these will relax properly, because one of them is backwards. Yep. Alright, so before we relax, we are just going to take one side and move it over the other, and then figure out which one is correct. Alright, this one needs to be flipped. Now we relax, set as default. Then we grab the one we just moved, we flip it back, and we move it back into position as best we can. It doesn't have to be perfect, and but it is. And there we go, perfectly mirrored. Now we just got to do these bits, which will just take the easy route, and we'll mirror these two. Let's see, you're most likely to see this left one, so that's in a good shape. We're just going to take this, flip it, and move it over. And that'll mirror that as well. And there we go, that's the grips right there. Sorry if that was off camera. And we'll just hide that. And all that's left now is the clip. It's definitely the most complex shape so far, but it's certainly not too challenging looking. The only thing we have to keep in mind is that we have a different smoothing group here, which means this will have to be separate. But other than that, there's no fancy mirroring to worry about or anything, so it's pretty much just going to be straightforward projection mapping and then relaxing, and a bit of stitching, maybe. So we'll reset this, the X-forms, go to our unwrap UV, normalize map off, and we'll just pick a good place to start. I guess we'll do this first. Just select this whole thing and map it. We'll relax it, and at the same time set our default relax settings, which will come in handy later. And there's that. Sorry, out of camera again. There's that. Relax. Now we'll do the entirety of this front face. There's no clean way to select this, so I'm just going to do it as quickly as possible. Make a mass selection and then deselect everything we don't need. Alternately, I could have done this whole selection last, and then I would have just been able to select everything that wasn't already mapped, but it didn't occur to me at the time, and it looks like we're all set anyway. So now we're going to open our window, deselect that part we've already mapped. That leaves us with just this. So we have average normals checked, we project it, relax it, and good to go. Then we'll do the back as well. Maybe just straight up select this one. Relax it, and good to go. Now all that's left is the outer perimeter, which we're going to do the exact same way we did the one on the handle proper, and these holes. These holes are going to be a bit of a sticking point. I'm not sure if we can mirror them. We probably won't, just because I'm not sure how well that'll work. Because I'm not sure. I think they're all the same size. We might be able to actually, but we might not want to. We could do these with cylindrical unmaps, which is cylindrical unwraps rather, right here, which is definitely the intuitive way to do it. But I don't like cylindrical unwrap for a couple of reasons. One is that it's just in general kind of finicky. It can be tough to get the seam exactly where you want it, and this is actually a pretty quick method anyway. So what we're going to do here is we're going to figure out where we want our seam. We're holding it like this, so seam here is pretty good. Going to get that same face for all of these circles. Then we're going to close this window, and we're just going to map every single face rapid fire. It helps a lot to have a quick planar map bound to a hotkey, as I do, because you can just do what I'm doing here and just select wildly without even having the edit window open. Alright. Now, all of those squares we just unwrapped are on the same square right here. And it would be very difficult to move out, manually. But we don't have to do that because we already moved these. All we have to do is stitch, stitch, stitch until we're done with each one. And in the end, this will probably turn out to be even faster than individually, cylindrically unwrapping every single one of these holes. And now that I think about it, I think we are just going to move these over each other. They should all be the same size. We got them in the same order anyway. And really any detail we did in there would probably be unnoticed anyway, so there's really no reason not to do it. It's easy enough. So that's that, and now all that's left is this outer perimeter. And because this is a rather long tutorial and we already covered this method, I'm just going to do this very quickly off camera, and then we'll come back and throw the whole map together. Alright, we're back. This whole thing's unwrapped. We've got it laid out here. As you can see, we've just gone all the way around the edges. I unwrapped in segments, relaxed, and then stitched everything together. One thing I did differently is that I just put these bits on their own segment, just to avoid keeping this one overly long, and because this one has some agreeable symmetry to it already, and we're probably going to be breaking it up later around that point, just because it's so long, I wanted to avoid making our job any harder in the future than it had to be, so that's why that's separate. Otherwise, totally normal. So we'll move that up, and I believe this is the last object we had to unwrap. It is. Excellent. So instead of hiding this one, I'm going to collapse the UV. I'm going to unhide by name, get all of our lows back, collapse the UVs. I don't technically have to do this, but I know it just feels cleaner. Uh-oh, did our UVs save here? They did, okay. Crisis averted. Alright, we're going to grab our grip, or any other part of it really, and attach everything. Now we're going to add a new unwrap UV modifier. Turn off the checkers there. This looks like every part. just check and make sure. Alright, this is every part. I'm going to select them all, scale them in, scale them in. This is because we turned off normalize map every time, so things got mapped super huge. Obviously they don't need to be that size, and if we had left normalize map on, they would have stayed within this square, but they wouldn't have been proportionally correct, so we would have been even more reliant on relax to get things right, and if you've used it enough, you know not to trust relax too much if you don't have to. So this is definitely the way to go. I think most people do it this way. We're just gonna get everything nice and close to our square so we can pack very well. Okay, so now we've got everything laid out here that we're going to have to pack. It's still proportionally correct, so assuming we don't scale everything or anything, which we're probably going to have to, if we put everything in this square right now as it is and somehow packed it together that way, we would have perfectly proportioned UV maps such that no part would have any more textile density than any other part. But that's probably not going to be the case. We're going to have to figure out parts of importance and make those larger on the map. So we should definitely figure those out early. I see that the largest part of this is clearly the handle, yet that will be covered by the hand most of the time during the game. When you take that into consideration, the blade definitely becomes the point of fixation, the things that the eye will look at most. So we're just going to get that on here first so we don't have to compromise it by scaling it down. I'm just going to scale it up a tiny bit to take full advantage of this space here, and then see if we can't get all of its pieces in with it nicely, cleanly. When possible, try to keep pieces that are separated near where they would be attached, just so when you're skinning you're not like manically looking for the one little polygon that you need to texture that you put 10 miles away from what it's a part of. Alright, so that's the whole blade. Moving on from that, we can probably figure that the handle is the next largest thing we'll see, so we're going to scale this down a bit to get it in there. And of course this is a major drag because we've got both sides of this, so we might actually have to end up scaling this down. Yeah, we're going to have to scale this down, so I'm just going to get that out of the way now. And scale this down a bit to make room for the other stuff. Shouldn't be too big a deal. I think that'll be alright, especially when you think about the hand covering it. Wonder if we couldn't do something like this. I don't know. I'm going to hold on to that solid corner though and see if I can't shove this up it. Actually, let's go back a few steps before we scaled everything and grab this too, and then just redo everything. And the reason I do this is so that this will scale along with these, so I don't have to use guesswork. I want these to have roughly the same textile density, so that it doesn't look funny like having the rim of this thing have more resolution than the side, because that'll be pretty noticeable once we start to add wear. So we're just going to move these back into position, and then we are definitely going to have to break this monster up. So let's see, where does the seam here naturally fall? That's pretty good, actually. I'm not liking this area. So let's get rid of that. Detach. And we're going to have to scale down this knife a bit, unfortunately. But not too much. Just enough to squeeze this in. Will we make it? Alright, we're going to have to move this a bit. I don't want to scale it too much more. moving it too much more either, though. Tell you what, we'll move this down a bit. These don't have to be too far apart, they just have to be far enough apart that they don't accidentally bake over each other. Then we'll move this up a bit. Then we'll select the whole affair. Just move that down and get it out of our hair. I'm sorry. Alright, so that's all set. Now, next most important thing. This is tough. Do we maximize the space on the grips or the clip? Neither. We're going to have to make some more room. We're going to have to scale this down. It's going to break the resolution a bit, which is too bad. So we're going to have a bit of a problem here. The resolution of the rim will be higher than the side, but it'll be worth it to squeeze these things in properly. Let's just get the grip in here quickly. It of course only has to be about the size it is relative to the actual grip on here. That'll work. Alright, now we just got this left. We might not even have to scale this one, which is pretty cool. This is a pretty loose map so far. Normally I like to get the maps packed a bit tighter than I've got this one at the moment, but you gotta take into account that there are a lot of organic shapes here. The knife blade, even the grip isn't really that straight, so we're not gonna get a perfectly tight map off of this. But it's not unreasonable to expect a decent amount of, or a decent lack of dead space. So yeah, we'll probably tweak this a bit. This I think we were going to break in half anyway. Let's see where the seam is. Yeah, I can deal with that. Detach. Oops. Detach. Move it into place. Will it fit? UV mapping is like doing a puzzle, only you don't actually know if a solution exists. So it's like doing a really terrible puzzle designed by an evil person, only it was really designed by you. Anyway, move this out of the way. And that should free up a bit of room, hopefully enough. Alright, we'll scale down a bit, we'll cheat. There we go. Alright, and I give up. Good enough. Ideally we'd want to keep these as straight as possible, but where they're so long, we don't have nice, hard, clean edges to work with anywhere. We can deal with it. We might be able to upscale a few things here and there, get some more detail out of it, but I really don't want to take up too much more time, so I'm just going to do a few slight optimizations, and then we'll move straight on to the baking. And that few slight optimizations is actually just me making the grip a bit bigger. Yeah. Whatever. It's not really worth messing with. So there we go. There we go. We're just going to unwrap, or textport rather, a quick diffuse, or just straight up unwrap actually. We're going to set up a specific folder for this. And dump our unwrap in there. I use PNG. You could use TGA. I just use PNG because you can see a thumbnail preview of it in Explorer. That's literally the only reason. Now, right before we set this up to bake, we just want to think if we want to do an exploded bake or not, and if we do, what we need to move. And I think we are going to do an exploded bake here. Yeah, we're going to have to do an exploded bake, unfortunately. So, an exploded bake is when you move parts of the model far away from each other, just while you bake, so that the cages you use for baking don't, step on each other's toes, and you don't bake one object into another that wasn't supposed to be related to it or anything like that. So we had these all attached to the main object here. I've just moved off the clip and the blade, and because of that they share the same origin with the grip, which means 0 for X. So I'm going to want to keep that in mind, because it means later at the end of this I'm going to have to remember that and move this back to 0. And luckily 0 is easy to remember. So for now we're just going to move that to 500. Not far enough. 1000. We want to keep these very far away from each other so that the AO doesn't, we don't get shadows off that knife on this side of the blade, because that would be incorrect. That's also on 0, so we're going to move that in the opposite direction. There we go, all laid out for us. Now we're going to attach everything up together again. Now we're going to unhide our high polys, move them into position, and take the turbo smooth off of the ones that we move away also, as well as any symmetry or whatever. Make sure, not so much for the high poly, but definitely for the low poly, that your origin is the same for everything, because you need to remember it later. -1000. Okay, that lines up, and then we're going to select our high poly grip. This is where having a name helps, because you can just look up there, because you've got both of them on top of each other, so sometimes you can't tell which you've selected. So when you've got the name, you can just look up and say, okay, I got the low. So we just need to grab the high now, go to Editable Poly, attach, stroll on over, and find our high poly. Yeah, we've got it. You can tell by the supporting edges, and we're just going to attach them. Grab the low poly there, and it won't detach, so we're just going to detach it manually. Let's try it again. Okay, got it that time. So now the entire high poly is on one. Oops, spoke too soon. We've actually got to attach the grips still. So, wood high, delete the turbo smooth, attach, got it. Alright, now the entire high poly is on one object. So next thing we're going to do is apply a new material to it. Make that material white in the diffuse and nothing else, no specularity or anything. Then okay folks, sorry about the jump there. At some point I managed to accidentally attach the majority of the low poly to the high poly, so I just turned the recording off a bit, went to a automatic backup, and fixed that. So basically the gist of what we were doing was getting the entire high poly object on one model. And what we are going to do now is just hide that, select our low poly grip, likewise attach every element of the low poly, I'm not sure if we already did this previously, but I hadn't in the save I reverted to, so we just did that now. We've got the every element of the low poly selected here. So we're going to call this low, and then we're going to go and unhide high. Now, before we get to the actual baking, we're just going to drop a standard skylight in the scene. We're going to go to its color, make sure it's white. By default, it has a bit of a bluish hue to it. We're also going to go to rendering, render setup. We just want to change a few things. Filter size to 0. I don't know if you actually have to do these things, but I'm going to. And most important, we have to go to light tracer and just make sure that's on. Alright, so we've got that all set up. Now we go to low. We press 0 and open our render to texture dialog. Now we're going to open this path. We're going to navigate to the UV folder we already created that we've designated for this. For me, it's tutorial knife. We're going to up the padding here to 4, enable projection mapping, pick high, options, green, this is important, up, and then ray mischeck off. Now we're going to close this for just a second while we get our cage working. We want to open this cage. It's a modifier for the low poly. Reset, because by default you just get garbage. Turn on shaded. And now what we want to do is individually by each part we want to select it and then push it until it covers up every detail, including floating geometry. Definitely including floating geometry. You want to make sure absolutely everything is covered completely. And we're just going to do that for each part. We might have to tweak this one a bit. Oops. For this, I'm just going to tweak the cage a bit to get it really tight around the edges here, because that'll help. If we leave it too loose around this really hard edge, what we'll get is a black outline around it, mostly black, sometimes not if there's a light right behind it in-game. And that's just because the normal is just kind of, it doesn't quite know what to do. It overcompensates and our edge will look really round, and we don't want that because it's a knife. So I'm just going to make sure we get a pretty tight edge here. And also on top. Otherwise we'll just leave it for now. And then we just got to do this one. Generally you can just pick out, you know, the most pronounced piece of floating geometry you have, if you have any, and just wait until that's fully covered up, because by the time that's covered up, chances are so is everything else you would want to be. Alright, this should be good. I don't notice any errors right away. We might get some. If so, we'll just change this, change the cage and rebake. So we've got our cage set up for now. We're going to reopen the render to texture dialog. Make sure that's checked. Use existing channel, yes. Now we're going to add complete map, then add again normal map. We're going to change the size on each of these to 1024. And then we're just going to set up the name and file type we want to use. Again, I'm going to use PNG. I just tend to simple names. We'll go to AO for the complete map, because that's what it is. It's an AO ambient occlusion map. And then just normal for the normal map. You might want to use a complex system if you're baking out, you know, individual things in an environment and they're all going to the same UV folder and you have to differentiate easily, but we don't have that problem here. So I think we're all set. that should be all the settings right. I'm just going to hit render, and then I'll pause this while it does that, and then we'll take a look at the finished results. Continue here. Alright, be back in a second. Okay, the bake's finished. We've got a copy of the complete map that opens automatically here. We can just go over, look for any early signs of trouble. This definitely looks like it might be a problem area. That's on the inside though, so we might not even have to worry about it. And right here and right here. Otherwise it's looking pretty good, but there's really only one good way to tell, and that's to visually affirm that everything is alright. So what we're going to do is temporarily hide the high. Select this. We can just leave the projection, doesn't matter. Going to make a new material, and we're going to go to DirectX Shader, discard old material. At this point you need to have a shader of your own, a DirectX shader, not of your own, just a custom one that you use. By default, 3ds Max does not really do viewport shading well at all. Even if you do get it set up so that you're seeing something that actually looks like a normal map operating in real time, you'll have problems. Last I used it, if you tried to undo, the program would hang up for a long time, possibly minutes. And really what you're seeing won't quite be an accurate representation of what you'll see in a game. So it's important to have a shader. This one I use is called a Zoliul shader. That's XOLIUL and then shader. You can just Google for it. It was posted on GameArtist.net, and basically it's just a good basically game preview shader. And so rather than talking about it, I'll just show you. It's available for free, by the way. I highly recommend it. It's going to take a few seconds to open here. Okay, this is what the shader looks like. We're going to apply it. I'm going to just scroll past all this for now. We don't need a diffuse map yet. We're just going to go to normal map, check that off. This shader also supports object space normal maps, which is another great reason to use it, because it actually supports them fairly correctly, which isn't something you see often with shaders. So let's see, UV map tutorial, or real-time shaders, I should say. It's only just starting to be in vogue. Alright, so we got that all set up. Let's take a look. There's a problem. It's on the side. We can probably just solve that with some cage shenanigans. This looks good though. Holes baked pretty well. Expert mode. Okay. Yikes on the blade. Looks like we had exactly the problem I was talking about earlier. I'm not sure. I'll try pulling the cage out a bit. Maybe it was caused by exactly the opposite of what I thought. But otherwise the blade's looking fine. And then the crucial bit here. Alright, this isn't looking bad. Alright, so I think in general we're just going to tighten up the cage in a few spots and then just rebake. So let's do this really quick. Projection. Oops, I had selection locked there, sorry about that. Just going to tighten our cage up in a few spots. And then rebake. Let's get this blade too. Guess I'll move it out a bit. Maybe moving it in tighter wasn't actually the correct solution. I'm not totally sure. We'll see how this goes. see. And lastly, yep, here we go. This happens sometimes. You'll get one vertex that doesn't really want to go with the rest of the cage. So you just gotta look for the errors and then go back and fix it. I'm surprised it only happened that one time, actually. Usually you get quite a few of those. Keeping your mesh in quads will help that, or triangles, just not n-gons. If you use n-gons in your low poly, you will see a lot more of that. The cage won't be as uniform. It'll just be a massive pain, basically. So that's that. Let's just quickly re-render. No need to change the settings. Oh, I forgot to unhide the high poly, which of course explains why nothing was baking. Let's try that one more time. Overwrite, overwrite. Okay, so there's our bake. We are going to select the high, hide it, probably for good this time. Update everything. We're just going to go in here, reload our normal map, and then we're all set here, so we're going to have to reassemble our model. What that means is we're just going to collapse the projection. We can make it again easily enough. It doesn't take long, so it's no great loss. We're going to detach the stuff that we exploded previously. Now we have to remember what coordinate we moved them to. I remember this one was -1000. So we'll move the pivot there, then we'll move it back to 0. Do the same over here. This one was +1000. And back to 0. And there we go. It's our low poly baked knife. So we're almost there. In the next tutorial, the final tutorial, we'll be taking this and we will be putting a texture on it. So I hope you guys watch it. I hope this one was helpful, and I'll see you then.